Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Audit and Finance Standing Committee for Wednesday, May 18th. It is 10:02 a.m. and I'd like to call the meeting to order. My name is Paul Russell and I represent Lower Sackville. I'd also like to acknowledge that the Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the traditional and unceded lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. And at this point, I'd like to proceed with just the roll call and the AV check, just to make sure that everybody's mic and video are working. So let's start with Councillor Daigle-Gammon from District 1. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. The audio and the video is working well, the voice not so much.
Well, here's hoping that the voice improves. I'm glad to see that you're on the mend. Councillor Hensby from District 2, good morning.
Good morning, all.
Good morning. Councillor Purdy from District 3, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone.
And Councillor Cleary from District 9, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. I think Kathy Daigle-Gammon, I was thinking about this yesterday, has a bit of a godfather-like quality to her voice. I was expecting a little, so I guess we'll have to call her Godmother from now on.
That would actually be appropriate.
Doesn't have the same ring.
It doesn't, but it fits Councillor Daigle-Gammon better.
My
Councillor,
favorite title is Godmother, Sean, just so you know.
there you go. Councillor Morse from District 10, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone.
And Mayor Savage, good morning.
Good morning, Chair. How you doing?
Doing great, thank you. And Evangeline, our Auditor General, good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Let's proceed with the agenda. And the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of April 20th, 2022. Can I please have a motion to approve this agenda? Thank you, Councillor Cleary. Seconder, please. Councillor Purdy, thank you very much. Are there any errors or omissions in those minutes? Not seeing any. All in favor of the minutes of April 20, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay. Great, thank you very much. The next item is the approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Over to the clerk. Do we have any changes this morning?
Thank you, Chair. There are no requests for additions or deletions for today's meeting.
Okay, thank you. So can I have a motion to approve the order of business as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. Seconder, please.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Morse. Any changes from committee of the one item on the agenda? Not seeing any. All in favor of the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay. Great, thank you. Business arising out of the minutes is, there is none. Call for declaration of conflict of interest. Not seeing any, okay. Motions of reconsideration, motions of rescission, consideration of deferred business, and notices of tabled matters are all none. Correspondence, do we have any correspondence today? And over to the clerk. Yeah.
Sorry, my apologies. Thank you,
good.
Chair. The clerk's office did not receive any correspondence for today's meeting.
Okay, and any petitions?
The clerk's office also did not receive any notification of petitions.
Okay, thank you. And I don't see any from committee. And there are no presentations, no information items brought forward. So we are on to the Auditor General's report, and this is item 12.1.1. The 2021-22 annual report and 2022-23 audit priorities. Go ahead, Evangeline, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. I'm going to share my screen. Just bear with me for a minute. That was the wrong button. Okay.
We can see that now.
Great, thank you. So I'm here this morning to speak to you about my 21-22 annual report and 22-23 audit priorities. This slide is just a summary of what is going on, I guess, at the moment, or what has happened over the last year. So we've released 4 audits since my last annual report, which would have been about a year ago. Management of accounts payable, transit technology project management, management of the fire inspection program, and management of solid waste operations. There are 3 audits ongoing at the moment in sort of various stages of completion, running from still at the planning stage to almost ready to report. And those audits are one of respectful workplaces, real estate, and Halifax water information technology. We released a couple of follow-up reports last year that covered 6 audits as listed there: payroll management, purchasing card program, road and sidewalk asset management, the LED streetlight conversion project, HRM's new website project, and fleet vehicle use, car allowances, and mileage. In my annual report, I provide some performance information on the office. So we have 3 items that we have targets for and that we report publicly. One is the percentage of staff time on audit versus non-audit activities, and our target for that is 85%. It was at 88% this year. The other 2 targets are related to recommendations in our audit reports. The first one is the percentage accepted that management intend to implement, and that the target for that is 100%, and it continues to be at 100%. That's one where we certainly strive to have recommendations that management feel, are implementable and are valuable recommendations. And so if management has concerns with draft recommendations to start with, we typically will talk to them about those, and generally through that process we can come to an agreement. It's often wording, maybe somebody thinks a recommendation means X when it means Y, and we clarify that. So that one, 100% sometimes seems like an ambitious target, but it is a fairly realistic target for that item. And then the percentage of recommendations implemented after 18 months. Our target for that is 80%. Previously, it had been above 80%. This year, it's at 63%. That is down from the past. Management tells us that COVID has had an impact on the ability to get things implemented. So we'll monitor that going forward to see if it trends back upwards again as we hopefully move out of COVID. My 2022-23 audit priorities are shown on this screen. So in addition to the 3 audits that I mentioned that are ongoing, I've got 4 that haven't started yet that are planned. So some of these won't end up being actually reported in 22-23 just from a workflow perspective, but they should be started before the end of the year. The first one's actually a carryover from 21-22. It's HRM's information technology. We had hoped to start that in late 2021-22, and it just didn't work out for a variety of reasons. We had some vacancies, and a couple of audits were a bit larger than we expected them to be. We're going to look at HRM's hiring practices. We are also going to look at the management of the Cogswell Interchange project to this point, and we're going to do an audit of diversity and inclusion initiatives. There's also 4 follow-up reviews that will come due in 2022-23. So that means it'll have been 18 months at some point during this fiscal year from when these audits were released. So that's building permits and inspections, the Halifax Regional Police IT audit, management of accounts payable, and transit technology project management. So depending on when they were originally reported, it'll be roughly 18 months later when we start the follow-up work. Sometimes if one audit was 18 months and another one's a couple of months later, we'll wait a couple of extra months and group them together. So sometimes an audit might be more like 20 or 21 months when we start follow-up, just from an efficiency standpoint. And this is the 5th year, I guess, of my mandate as Auditor General. And so I felt like it was a good time to go back and look at outstanding recommendations that I have made since I was appointed that weren't implemented when we did the initial follow-ups. So it won't include the most recent follow-ups that were released because we just did those and it doesn't make much sense to follow up the outstanding recommendations in only a couple of months. These are some of the more historical ones from 2017 to 2019. So there's management of drinking water safety at Halifax Water, management of surplus buildings and land, an audit of procurement, management of development approvals, Halifax Transit bus maintenance, payroll management, and road and sidewalk asset management. So that's not an inclusive list of the audits from that time period. It only includes audits that had at least one recommendation outstanding. If they were all completed, they're not part of this list. And that is it for my presentation this morning. If you have any questions, I would be happy to try to answer those.
Okay. Thank you very much, Evangeline, for that. For members of committee, if you do have any questions, please, as is normal, indicate that in the chat. And I don't see anybody jumping to that. We have had, I believe Councillor Hensby has a question, although I'm not quite sure how to interpret it. Go ahead, Councillor Hensby.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, one of the audits she has in progress is real estate. I was kind of wondering with that review of real estate, especially with some of our acquisition files, is there a measurement you're using when council approves a certain acquisition or to proceed to look at acquiring a piece of parkland or whatever the case may be, when the initial council request is to the actual completion? I have a few outstanding recreation real estate requests that have been approved by council, and I looked up on property online the other day, and they're still in the name of the previous property owner. So it's like over a year now, and I'm just wondering how long does it take for some of our real estate transactions to follow through. So I was wondering if you're measuring the time period from council's request to actual conclusion.
So that's an audit that is just starting to, it's almost finished planning. So we don't have the final scope yet, although it's quite close to being final. Typically when we start out, we have a pretty high level topic and we would gather information about all of the different things that real estate does and then decide out of all of those things, and this would apply to any audit topic, which ones that we will select to audit. We will be looking at some of the acquisition and disposal processes. I don't want to say a whole lot about it because we haven't quite finalized the scope yet, and we haven't started field work yet. But as part of that, we will look at timelines. And as with any of our audits, when councillors see a topic, if you have information that you think is useful or you have concerns in that particular area or positive comments in that area, you think it's something that's, you've seen evidence it works really well. Those are all helpful things to pass along, and please feel free to do that with any audit topic.
That'd be great. All right. I was kind of wondering if there should be like an in-camera report from real estate to have a transaction tracking sheet in regards to the initiation of the request, be it an acquisition, sale, or disposal, or expropriation, and just have a tracking sheet of where it is and where it is in the progress in the process. So, okay, appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hensby. Councillor Daigle-Gammon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Evangeline. I'm wondering about of the outstanding recommendations. Is there any way to prioritize those on like which needs the more attention quickly? I know that when there's an audit, there's always the recommendations, but when there's 7 that have outstanding recommendations, I'm just wondering if there's any way that they could be prioritized.
So from my perspective, when I issue an audit report to start with, I stay away from making formal recommendations in the report that aren't what I would consider to be a high priority. So if we find minor things that we think should be corrected or that could use a review, we just let management know about that, but you wouldn't see it as a recommendation in an audit report. And so for that reason, I don't like to rank them, and I don't like to rank audit topics against each other, because it's easy to look at certain topics and say, okay, well, drinking water looks really important because it's drinking water, but you could have a control that's missing somewhere else that, you know, could present a fraud risk. And that is a different type of risk, but it might still be a significant risk. So I'm always reluctant to try to prioritize for those sorts of reasons, and because I try to only make the more significant recommendations to start with. The fact that there's 7 of them, I mean, really part of that is a reflection of, I mean, our target is 80%.
Mhm.
I don't always expect to see 100% when we follow up. So I do expect to see, you know, some recommendations that wouldn't have been addressed at the time of follow-up. And we really picked that 80% because some recommendations are a little easier to implement. And, you know, there's always the odd one that involves either needing a lot of funding or a lot of, you know, sometimes systems, IT changes, that sort of thing that can take longer. And it's 7 really because we're following up 2017, 2018, and 2019. And there are a few audits in there where all of the recommendations were complete, but for any that, even if it's just one rec, it's on that list.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. So we have the recommendations. What are the best practices from other jurisdictions going forward? Would it make sense to ask for the progress reports or status reports or action plans or something like that for each of them?
So from a best practice standpoint, committees like audit and finance committees, or, you know, municipal councils, provincial or federal public accounts committees, all oversight type bodies. The best practice would be that when an audit is released, that those committees would look at the recommendations and ask management for an action plan within a certain time frame. Sometimes it comes with the audit report and is to be ready at that time. Sometimes it's a month later or 3 months later. And then there's, you know, in a best practice scenario, there'd be a periodic follow-up. So perhaps twice a year, perhaps once a year, audit and finance or council would ask to have an update on outstanding on the recommendations up to that 18-month follow-up point. And then after that, I would say practices probably vary from one jurisdiction to the next, whether or not committees continue to follow up. I would think that follow-up ought to continue, or I guess some level of reporting on whether or not recommendations have been implemented should continue for at least a period of time. When recommendations get really old, sometimes they can start to become no longer relevant because processes have changed. And I guess we'll discover if that's the case with any of, say, the 2017 ones, which are roughly 5 years old at this stage. So once you hit that sort of 4 to 5 year mark, after that, I don't know how much value there is in continuing to follow up because things could have changed.
Right.
But I think up to about that 5 year mark, there's probably still value in it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Evangeline. I don't see any further questions in the chat, so there is also no motion attached to this. So we can either leave this as is within audit and finance, or we could forward it to regional council for information. Go ahead, Councillor Purdy.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually just had a question about the unresolved recommendations. So there's no policy in place then that connects the lack of recommendations with any type of penalty or the recommendations being adhered to with a reward. So there's no real there's no real penalty if the business units don't follow the recommendations, other than just having these follow-ups to share what has and hasn't been done.
Pretty much. I mean, the Auditor General's role by virtue of sort of being independent and objective, but by virtue of being an appointment and not an elected role, is that we make recommendations, but we don't enforce. We can't make management implement them. And that is entirely appropriate, because that's a whole different animal. If we had the authority to require management to make changes, really that role lies with elected officials like yourselves to determine if you agree with the recommendations, if you think they're significant and important, and then to hold management accountable for implementing them. And that's what you'll see across all jurisdictions. And that's where that accountability for, I guess, the public, the taxpayers of HRM lies, is through elected officials, and that's quite appropriate.
Okay. All right.
So I don't have a stick in that regard. Some people think I should, but I definitely should not.
And yes, I would agree with that. That is absolutely something for management to hold in their stead. So thank you very much, Councillor Purdy. Thank you very much, Evangeline. I don't see any further requests for questions in the chat. So again, Councillor Daigle-Gammon has suggested a motion, perhaps. I'm not sure. Would you like to forward this to Regional Council as an information item?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Yes, I would move that we forward the report to Regional Council as an information item.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Morse. And thank you, Annie, for being so on the ball that you've got that motion in the chat. I don't know that we need to read the motion. Councillor Daigle-Gammon basically encapsulated it. So all in favor, or is there any discussion on that motion? I suppose I don't see any. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Great, thank you very much. And again, thank you very much, Evangeline, for everything that you do and have done for the municipality. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
We have the next items on the agenda are staff. There is none. Grants committee, there is none. Members of standing committee, there is none. There are no motions. There is no in-camera segment. There are no added items. Notices of motion. Not seeing any. Public participation. Nobody has signed up, and just as a reminder for those watching from home, there were no registered participants for this meeting. In order to register for these virtual meetings, you would have to do so at 4:30 p.m. on the day before the meeting. So that would have been 4:30 p.m. yesterday, May 17th. The date of the next scheduled meeting of the Audit and Finance Committee is June 22nd, 2022. And with that, could I have a motion to adjourn, please?
I move we adjourn.
Thank you very much, Councillor Morse. We stand adjourned.
Thank
Thanks.
you.